All right. Well, we're talking about relationships this week, this month, and really when I was working and planning on this service, really thought this would be kind of a good introduction, a nice, easy little thing. And really, the deeper I get into it, the deeper that this affects me and works in my life. Today, we're going to be talking about those bonds that we have in friendship, our friendship bonds that we have, and it's really a good place to start when we start talking about relationships. Like I said, it's February. We're eventually going to get to Valentine's Day, and we're going to want to talk about love and romance and marriage and all that stuff. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there eventually. But it really starts with the idea of friendship. I'm having people wonder if I'm on, but we got to be careful because I started giving feedback earlier. So, all right, but we're talking about relationships and friendships. And it's friendships. We should be able to talk about that. It should be nice and easy. But the more I got into it, the more I realized how deep and serious and impactful a subject like this can be. Now, I don't have any lifelong friends. Like some of you might talk about lifelong friends. My dad was in the military, and in the military, when you're a military brat, a kid growing up in there, you really have to develop the art of building disposable friends. I mean, you're in a place at most for 4 years. The longest I ever lived anywhere when I was a kid was 4 years, and I was a little bitty when that happened. And then the people that you're around, that you're surrounded with. I mean, there were 1 million kids my age near me where I lived because everybody in the military, the people that are at that rank, are all basically the same age, having kids at the same time. I mean, I'm a Vietnam War kid, so everybody on the bases where I was were born at the exact same time. Dad comes home for his 1 month off or whatever, and then goes back to war, and then 9 months later the hospitals have 10,000 children in them, and that was the way I was raised in the military with these groups of people that all had similar experiences, and no matter who you got close to, you knew the odds were they were going to be leaving in a couple years, or you were going to be leaving in a couple years, and that was it. And so really developed the idea of having quick and disposable friendships. I mean, I still remember some of their names, and I remember the activities and the things that we did with those friends. I remember a lot of the good times that we had with them. But when you have people saying, oh yeah, I got a picture of the two of us when we were babies in the crib together, and I don't really have any of those friends. I mean, my longest friends, when I finally got into high school, at that point in time, you're really starting to make life decisions and building friendships. And so I have some friends that I developed when I was like a junior and senior in high school, but that's as far back as I go with my friendships. People often ask, where are you from? And I'm like, well, that's a difficult question. Are you asking where I'm born? Are you asking what license plate was on my car when I was a kid? Are you asking where did I get my accent or whatever? I mean, that's a loaded question because I'm not from anywhere. When I moved to Texas, so my dad, we were stationed, I was born in Spokane, Washington State. So if you're trying to make a map, we immediately moved after a couple years to Annapolis, Maryland. So we lived in Maryland. My dad worked in D.C. and did some stuff there with the Air Force. And from there we moved to Guam. And then from Guam, in the middle of winter in Guam, when I was on the beach in my tank top, we moved to Caribou, Maine, and that was tough. And so I lived in Caribou, Maine for 4 years. It was like the longest place I had lived when I was a child. Lived in Caribou, Maine for 4 years, up into middle school. My dad retired there. My grandfather had passed away just about a year before he had retired. So we moved to Tyler, Texas, where my grandmother was there alone by herself. We went there for 2 years, where my dad used the GI Bill to get his his master's in computer science, and we took care of my grandmother, and then he found a job teaching at Hardin Simmons University, a Christian school in Abilene, Texas, and we moved out to Abilene, Texas, and that's where I ended up graduating from high school. It's out in Abilene, Texas. And when I came there, and we found a church, and most of my friends were kind of in a church background, because that's where in the military we would always find a church, and I would always find a home there. And in Abilene we found our church and met some people and met some of my still to this date, some of my best friends. One of the first people we met was a guy named Jimmy Bible. All right, and my kids know Jimmy Bible. They know Jimmy Bible's kids and stuff. But I meet Jimmy Bible. He was a year behind me in school, but was actually older than my older brother. He was hunting one day and accidentally shot himself in the leg and had to miss a year of school because of that. And so Jimmy and I were going through a lot of school experiences together, and then he related really well to my brother because they were the same age. So the three of us did a lot of things together, and Jimmy Bible was one of my good best friends. And Jimmy always called me Yankee. Now that's going to seem funny to you guys because you know that I come from Oklahoma. But remember, I had just moved from Maine, and he was a true blue Texan in every sort of the way. He had the big cowboy buckle. He wore cowboy hats. He had boots. There was once we were out at the place he lived. He lived on a children's home, so his parents couldn't take care of him. So he was being raised in a children's home. And one of the things that the children's home had was like a barn. And so Jimmy was kind of in charge of the horses and stuff at the barn. One of the horses had gotten out once while I was just visiting Jimmy, and I don't know anything about horses, and he walks over to it, takes off his belt, wraps it around the horse's neck like a harness, and walks it back to the barn. That was Jimmy, all right? Jimmy did stuff like that. He could talk to horses and would ride them around, and he was a cowboy. And I did not speak like a Texan, and I did not own a pair of cowboy boots or wear a cowboy hat. I thought they were kind of silly at the time, and so I was the Yankee, and that's what he called me my entire life. And I don't know if you've got friends like that try to find anything they can that they hate about you, and then that's what they latch to you the rest of your life. But for Jimmy, for the longest time, I was the Yankee. And so for those of you that are out there that keep thinking, I don't have any street cred being up here in New England, all right, I lived in Caribou for 4 years. I was way north, all right? Once you get that far north, like every year's like dog years. They count for 7. So I was there for a long time. And so that was me. I was the Yankee down in the deep south of Texas, out in West Texas, amongst the oil rigs and the cows and the tumbleweeds and the Jimmy Bibles. And that was where I started my first lifelong friendships. I actually had another buddy, my buddy Kevin Armstrong, and Kevin and I, and once again the kids are looking at me like, I know all those people. We know these people because they are the people that have become my lifelong, connected with me forever sort of friends. And so when I think about friendships, I think about that group of people. You know, some wiry little nerd, and I was a nerd before nerd was cool. You know, there's like nerd fashion nowadays, and nerd stuff is cool nowadays. All right, it was not cool back in the 80s. All right, it was not cool. But I was that kid. I mean, I was that kid that buttoned my collar up to the top. I mean, you go and watch, those stories about like those Big Bang Theory guys. That was me. I was like Sheldon Cooper. I wore my pen protector for my pockets and all that sort of stuff. I was the dork of dorks. It was bad. It was really bad. And you guys chose me to be your pastor, all right? That's on you, all right? When the dirty secrets come out, that's on you. But I was awful. I was this dorky little kid, didn't have any interpersonal skills. I mean, I really was very, very poor at relating to people. And all of a sudden, I'm no longer on the military base. In the military base, you were just friends by default. You showed up and you had to be friends with your neighbor. Why? Because somebody was going to leave. And so everybody was used to these disposable friends. But when you move into a brand new town and you didn't grow up there, and that wasn't the place where you were, and those people are not military people, they already have their friends. They already have their groups. They already have their people. And you come in and you're an outsider. And if it wasn't for those weirdos like Jimmy Bible and Kevin Armstrong, and he had a twin brother, Keith Armstrong, if it wasn't for those guys at some point in time embracing me and my brothers and saying, hey, we want you to be a part of our friend family, there's no telling where I would end up today. The very first thing I ever did with Jimmy and Kevin is we go to town and we look for a church. And our dad picked the first two churches we went to visit. So we visited the big First Baptist Church. If you've never been to a down south First Baptist Church, it's an experience you should do it one time, all right? I don't recommend doing it more than once, but do it at least one time just to say, okay, I saw it. That was big. That was crazy. That was different. All right, go see that. And then we went to what was the uppity church. There's always like the big old-fashioned, old money church, and then there's the new money church, and my dad's like, oh yeah, this guy's got the highest quality pastor, the one that has the most degrees, the one that looks the best, has all the things going for it. And we went to those churches, and my brothers and I were like, we're out. We don't relate to any of these kids. These are kids for doctors and lawyers and stuff, and many of them are fine people, and I've gotten to know them since then, but that just wasn't us. We were just a bunch of military brats that like to run around on bikes and hang out and stuff, and so we're like, Dad, that's not it. And so my dad's calling around to some other churches and finds this church, Southside Baptist Church, and says, all right, we're going to check Southside Baptist Church out, all right? I'm like, great. He said, they're doing a youth lock-in. I was like, oh, okay. And I signed you up for it. It's tomorrow. You're going. And I'm like, whoa, no. I don't want to hang out for a whole night at a lock-in. That sounds like a bad idea, and that's exactly what happened. My dad dropped us off at the church. They threw us into the education building, and they locked the doors, and we were in there with these people. We had no clue who they were for the next 24 hours, and it was terrifying, but at the same time, it was a group of people that loved us and cared about us and did whatever they could to try to reach out to us to make us feel at home. Kevin and Keith Armstrong, they're twins, not identical, but they're twins, and they're both, I don't know, about 6'5", 6'6", and huge. And then Jimmy Bible is about 3 feet 6 inches. He was little bitty, and the three of them grabbed my brother and I, and they were like, all right, new faces, you're it. And from that, we developed a lifelong relationship. That's a really super long introduction. And I just need you to know kind of where I come when I talk about friendships. That friendships are hard for me to build. I actually did a personality test, right? It's the worst thing in the world. Don't do personality tests because you'll learn stuff about yourself, all right? And I did a personality test, and in my personality test, it actually said, your type of personality doesn't value acquaintances. I'm like, oh, what in the world? My type of personality looks at people, those people that are like, everybody's their best friend. Hey, how are you doing? All right, hey, great. Oh, good to see you again. How's the wife and kids? And you're like, when was the last time you saw them? Oh, it was 5 years ago. Then why are you pointing at them and saying wife and kid stuff? It says my personality is like, those people wear me out. It says your personality tends to grab onto one or two good friends and will latch onto them until you strangle the life, didn't say strangle the life, but latch onto them for the rest of your life. And if they ever do anything to hurt you, then you're dead to me. And I'm like, whoa, that's harsh. But that's what the personality test. And then I started looking, I was like, I only have one or two good friends, and I don't have any acquaintances. I'm like, oh no, it's right. I'm that kind of guy. And I realized that throughout my life in the military, where I built a lot of disposable relationships, then as I moved into towns where people already had their relationships and didn't need to add anybody else to them, I really got to the point where I did embrace that idea. I don't need all you friends since you don't need me. And I don't want to get too close because I know I'm going to lose you. And that's tough. That's a hard place to be in when you start moving around a lot, because you realize, oh, I don't have people to be close to me. And there is a value to friendship. And I think when you lose it or you're not near it, you learn all the more how valuable those friendships are. And so I want to read a couple verses. The book of Proverbs always has a ton of verses about any subject you'd want, but one of those is the subject of friendship. And I want to talk a little bit about what the wise say about friendship. And I want to do that through the filter of Jimmy and Kevin. We were kind of the three amigos. That movie came out at that time. We actually have a picture of all of our faces inside a cutout of the three amigos. We made Jimmy being the tall amigo and Kevin in the short one, so it was ironic. But I want to look at these passages about friendship. So I'm going to read all four of them, and then we're going to come back and talk about them. But Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need." Proverbs 18:24, it says, "There are friends who destroy each other, but a real friend sticks closer than a brother." Proverbs 27:6 says, "Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy." And Proverbs 27:17, and I know many of you know this verse, "As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend." You know, I read those passages and I read those things about friends, and it really does give me perspective on what transpired to help these people that I've known for my entire life to truly become my friends, to truly be people that I would do anything I could in order to help these guys out, to work with them. I've gotten to see their families be raised and grow, and so many blessed things about them. But I think about a friend is always loyal. A friend is always there. You know, we think about biblical reasons to have friends. Every one of us needs somebody that is loyal to us. That is like, you may have murdered somebody, but I'm going to hold your hand as we go to the court tomorrow, because while what you did was wrong, I know that you need somebody to support you, to lift you up, to encourage you, to be there for you. You know, in our worst days, in our hardest times, when things just aren't going like we want them to go, to have somebody that's going to be loyal, that's going to stick by your side, even on that day that you've done something wrong, even on that day that you've messed things up. It says there are, quote, friends. There are people that destroy and tear each other down. But a real friend sticks closer than a brother. Now Jimmy made fun of me all the time because I was the Yankee. He wanted to make sure in every way possible I knew I did not belong in Texas. I was not a Texan. I did not deserve the moniker of Texas. Texas were for honorable and beautiful people, and I was not one of them. And he did that all the time. And I let him know that if being a Texan meant you had to be that short, that, you know, and I learned a lot of short jokes, which was bad because I married a short woman and we had a short child. And so I have a lot of material that I had built up, and sometimes it comes out at the wrong time, but it's okay. We picked on each other, yeah. We prodded each other. That was part of that friendship that we had. We knew the nice ways that we could rib one another. Now here it does say there are people that are friends that destroy each other. I want you to know, I'm not telling you latch on to every friend. There are toxic relationships that are out there. People that tear you down, that don't lift you up. Remember the edifying from last week? People that are not building you up. And if you got people like that in your life, we got to get rid of those people. We got to get rid of people that are not building you up. Like that last verse, iron sharpens iron. Sharpening that iron, it's a rough process sometimes. It's a tough process. It might hurt in the process. But if you're a friend, when you're sharpening that iron, when you're a friend, when you're working with each other, when you go through those rough times and those hard times, you are actually making that other person better. And when you make that person better, that's proof all the more that you're their friends. And so yes, sometimes we do some fun ribbing, and sometimes we do hurt ourselves. The verse 27:6 says, "Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy," because sometimes you need a person that's just going to kick you in the rear. So you're doing it wrong. You're hurting your family. You've got problems at work. You need to break up with that boyfriend, whatever it is. Sometimes a friend that wounds us for a valuable reason is way better than those enemies that are constantly like, "No, keep doing that. No, don't worry, it won't hurt you. That destructive behavior, you know what? It's fine. Lots of people do it." And so I think about my friends. I think about what they mean to me. And I think about the golden rule. You know, that golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And I feel like that's a powerful a powerful verse for us to apply to our friendships. What type of friend should you be? What type of friend should I be? I should be the type of friend that does the things that I wish people did to me, did for me. And if you've got a friendship like that, you're going to find that give and take. A friendship that supports one another, empowers one another, cares for one another, defends one another, celebrates one another, loves one another, is passionate for one another. You know, some of the stupidest things I ever did, I did with my friends. I don't know, you guys probably never did stupid things with your friends. Remember I told you Kevin was this big, hulking man. He is my best guy, and I never had to worry for anything, because if people saw us coming around the corner, they would know not to mess with me, because I had my Kevin. And Kevin was a glasses guy like I was, and we had gone to Schlitterbahn. Once again, you ever get to Texas, look up Schlitterbahn. It's a water park, and go find it. Go celebrate at Schlitterbahn. And on one of the big slides, for some unknown reason, Kevin was wearing his glasses, and his glasses come off and they're gone, and he is blinder than I am. And so this Sasquatch of a man, we try to find his glasses, we look for him, and eventually we're told, look, at the end of the day, they send people down there and they just scoop everything up and we'll put it in lost and found. And so we have to leave. We're with the youth group, and Kevin is completely blind. He has an old pair of glasses that he broke right down the middle, so he has epoxied them together and then put tape around it. I mean, no kidding. I mean, he's trying hard to tell people, look, I'm a nerd, I got my glasses taped together. But legitimately, his glasses are taped together with epoxy on it, and just the worst thing in the world. And he says, Philip, I have to get my glasses. Like, okay. He's like, Schlitterbahn, they got to have them by now. We're a day later. I got to get my glasses. Like, okay, let's do it. And so he tells his mom, I got to go to Schlitterbahn and get my glasses. And I tell my dad, Kevin needs me to go to Schlitterbahn and get his glasses. And I know what you guys are thinking right now. All right, they're going to go and be nice people. All right, Texas is a big place. So imagine Connecticut, and then imagine like 5,000 more of them. That's Texas. So we were going not like to Rhode Island, all right? Schlitterbahn was a 4-hour drive from Abilene, where we were, and this is out in West Texas, so the roads are straight. So we're talking hundreds of miles to get to Schlitterbahn, and two guys after school are like, we're going to Schlitterbahn. So we get in the car, we get ready to go. Kevin had called them before we left. They're like, hey, we're coming to get them. And the guy said, oh, well, by the way, we close at 6. We just got out of school like 3:30, and we're doing the math. It's a 4-hour drive, and Kevin's like, we can make it. And he's my good best friend, and I'm like, oh yeah, we can make it. I've never driven faster in my life, and I've never seen my life flash before my eyes so many times. It was like a reel of my life coming back over and over again. And so me and my stupid friend Kevin drove 1 million miles an hour, made it with 5 minutes to spare, got his pair of glasses, and then didn't get home until like midnight because we drove slower coming home, and it was wild. And it was stupid, but it was my friend, and at the time he desperately needed something. I mean, this was something that in his family, I mean, Kevin didn't have a dad. It was just his mom trying to raise Kevin and his twin brother, who had never known their dad, because the dad actually ran out of the house when the mom found out she was having twins. He's like, that's too much. And he was gone. And Kevin didn't have anything. And that pair of glasses was the only pair of glasses that he was going to have. And he worked hard in order to help provide foods and meals and things for his family. And if he didn't have those glasses, he couldn't do the stuff he needed to do. So his mom, who's often working 2 shifts, I mean, I rarely saw her around because she was working so much, because his mom was out there doing stuff. And that's what a friend does. A friend is like, whatever you need, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to lift you up, and I'm going to support you. And throughout my entire life, when Kim and I decided that God was calling us to plant a church, Kevin lives 30 miles away from Oklahoma City in a town called Shawnee. And when he found out we were planting a church, he's like, I'm going to be there. I'm like, Kevin, it's like a 45-minute drive to get here. You don't, he's like, I'm going to be there. And he was one of the founding members of our church. We had the best church growth going on because he had a kid like every year. And so he had like 7 kids. He was a be fruitful and multiply 7. Are we right? 8? Do they have 8? I don't know. I lost count at some point in time, but it was great for church growth. We were constantly growing in that church. We had 3, and we were like the family that people kept looking at us like, what's wrong with you guys? I'm like, what do you mean? So we had one with 4 kids. There were a lot of kids in the church. And that's not a hint to anybody out here. I'm just saying that was a different church, different people. But it was that friendship that we had built. And because of that strong friendship, he was willing to load up his entire family in the back of their Suburban and drive to the church that we were planting. And to this very day is still one of the most impactful people that has ever been a part of the ministry we're doing. I mean, I preach every Sunday from this iPad. Guess where this iPad came from? It came from Kevin. When we started traveling on our ministry where we were driving around, Kevin went and bought us a huge toolbox, all with brand new tools, with everything we could possibly need. He's like, look, I don't know what you have, but this has everything you need, and I don't want you to be out there on the road and not have something you need. And how many times did we have to use that toolbox to do stuff? That van, I know it looks like a sweet swagmobile out there, and you're like, man, I wish I could have something like that. It is not as reliable as you think it is. And man, that toolbox came in handy because he was taking care of me. My friend Jimmy actually works at the college that Tate's going to be going down to. He is our midway point between here and home. And so every time we drive home, we stop at Jimmy's house, and Jimmy is lifting us up and encouraging us and helping us with the things we're needing, being a support to all the ministries we've done. And that's what that friendship does. That's what having a great friendship is all about. I want to read you a second verse out of Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And this is still Solomon writing, but I think this is a really astute observation that he's writing. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9, it says, 2 people are better off than 1, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer. 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. Friendship's not a luxury. It's not something that you just like, well, if I got the time. If I can find somebody that's not that big of a burden. Friendship is not something that we just pick up if we can. Not something that's just a little here or there. I've told parts of this story, and I don't know how far I'll get through the story, but Kevin and Jimmy, high school friends, some of my best friends in the entire world. But they were high school friends. Kevin and I spent some time in college together. And then we were apart. Jimmy lives in Virginia. I've moved away. I lived in Oklahoma, Texas, when Kevin lived in different places. But for years, I had another friend. And it's the weirdest story of how I got this other friend. So Kim and I met in Shawnee, the place where Kevin works. He actually works at Oklahoma Baptist University, where Kim and I graduated from high school. Kevin graduated from high school, not going to honors classes, not being, he was the guy that did shop classes, and he worked on cars, and he still works on cars, but visited us one year at OBU and decided he missed that relationship and camaraderie, and so came up to OBU and started just taking small classes one at a time. And it took him several years, but he eventually got his degree and ended up getting it in IT, and now he runs all of the computers for the entire university. But while at OBU, I meet Kim. She and I start going to the same church, which I always recommend finding friends and finding relationships in the church. It's the best place. We start going to church there, And Kim went to a small Christian school, but ironically, there was actually a pretty decent number of kids that went to that school that lived in the area in Oklahoma, even though she grew up in Greenville, Texas. So a girl that was 1 year behind her pastor's daughter, actually went to OBU. One of the friends that she graduated with, one of her close friends, she was in a class of 10, and there was like a trio of them that always hung out together. And he was going to a Nazarene school. He was Nazarene, going to a Nazarene school that was in Oklahoma City. And so when we would go to Oklahoma City, it was the town that had malls and stuff. When we would go to Oklahoma City, we'd often meet up with Darren. And got to know Darren. And we joke about it because, at these little private Christian schools, there wasn't a lot of dating, or there wasn't a prom, but they would do like, their banquet thing where everybody would dress up fancy, and then the faculty would do some sort of banquet thing. And Kim and Darren had gone to that banquet a couple of times, so we have pictures of them dressed up for their banquet for, their Christian prom, whatever that thing is. And so we always used to joke about how Kim and Darren dated when they were in high school, and like, we did not. But Darren and I, he was the guy that I had to get approval from in order for me to actually date Kim and then eventually marry Kim. Like, he was the gatekeeper, like, I'm watching you. And Darren was like 6'5" too. Why are all of our friends so tall? Darren was like 6'5" as well. And he's like, I'm watching. And so Darren's always on me. But Darren was the nerdest of all nerds. I mean, I'm a dorky guy, but I'm a dork. He was a nerd. It was totally different, all right? He was the worst of the worst. He could quote to you all the Star Treks and Star Wars, and he collected all the figurines and had them, and he probably has $10,000 worth of Star Wars stuff from back in the 70s, because that's the kind of nerd he was. And Darren was an only kid, and so Darren didn't really have a family group, a family relationship to go to, and so his friends were super important to him, and so Kim was super important to him, and so all of a sudden I realized Darren's going to have to be super important to me. But it wasn't just like that. The more I got to know Darren, the more I realized that we really were akin in spirit. And Darren and I began getting closer and closer to one another as friends. In fact, we started doing so many things together. I mean, we went and saw every new Star Wars movie that came out together. And like, he and I were the guys that would go and camp out the night before, and we would go there and be there first thing. We took our daughters. So his daughter was born at the same time Cambry was born. So we would take our daughters when they were like 1 year old. We're like, we're going to go see a Marvel movie. And we would be out there watching, the Spider-Mans or whatever with our daughters when they're 1 year old. Like, they're going to love this stuff. And we've got pictures of Cambry dressed up like R2-D2 and Caitlin dressed up like C-3PO. Why? Because we're that kind of awesome parents, all right? And we became close, like so close. And they would always find us where we were, whether we were in Texas, when we were out in West Oklahoma. And when we were in West Oklahoma, we started struggling. As a family, we had some struggles out there. There were some things that were going on in the church that were not the way we wanted them to be. And it just happens sometimes, or sometimes it's just not a fit, or things are just weird, or people don't know how to treat their ministers or whatever, and just some problems that were going out there. And Darren had been going to what is now the largest group of churches in the country called Life Church. He was one of the early members of that, and he's like, come to my church. Come find some healing. And he's the one that really brought us to Oklahoma City. He really is one of the people that kind of pointed out that there was a school there in Bethany that was looking for a teacher that Kim ended up getting the job at. The school he went to, the Nazarene school, was right next door to that high school. And Kim gets that job there. And we become intimately related to those people, to that town, to that community. And we spend our entire life, our kids, Cambry probably doesn't remember anything else except for that until we moved up here. That was the only place she had ever been her entire life, except for the first 2 years of her life out in West Oklahoma. And Darren became closer to me than any friend I've ever had. We did vacations together. Like I said, we did life together. We planted a church together. He was the editor for everything that I ever wrote. He was editing my books and the things that I did. And I always felt like I was a genius when I was around him, because he always made everything that I did seem like it was the best thing ever. He built up everything I did, and the guy didn't take credit for anything. The guy didn't say, oh, you know what, I fixed this chapter here. Let's put our names on this article together. No, he was just like, no, I just tweaked a few things there, and he completely rewritten stuff. The guy was was relentless. He would work all day, and then he would come back and he would do ministry stuff all night long, and sometimes till midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, working as hard as he could. And that was my friend Darren. And we were inseparable in so many ways that we couldn't get apart from each other. And then all of a sudden, 3-4 years ago, Darren dies. And when you start thinking about friends, remember, I'm the guy that disposes of friends. I'm supposed to be able to just chunk them out when I don't need them anymore. And all of a sudden, I've developed this friendship with this guy that's lasted years and years and years. That we've shared every intimate aspects of our lives. I mean, when we had problems, and every marriage has problems, when we have problems, he and his wife were the people that we would sit down with first and say, hey, let's talk through, because we knew that they would give us wise advice, but they would give us godly advice, and that they would always help us get things back on the right path. Whenever we struggled, whenever we hurt, whenever the ministry was hard, whatever happened, I applied for 8 different ministry jobs in a course of a year because I was out of the ministry and desperately wanted to be back in. 8 different ones, 8 different rejections. But every single time, Darren was there to lift me up, to encourage me, to move me on to the next thing, to help me with the next path we were working on. And then when he dies, that one guy, that friend that was above every other friend, is all of a sudden gone. And I read this passage now where it says 2 people are better off than one. And I can agree with that. I can say, yeah, 2 people are better off than one. It is better to have 2 of you than to have 1 of you, for they can help each other succeed. And if one person falls, the other one can reach out and help. And I realized at that moment that was no longer my life. That was no longer who I was. In a sense, my entire life I had treated friendships like luxuries. I could have them or I didn't need to have them. They were okay or not okay. It didn't matter. Friendships were something that I could dispose of. I didn't have to have them. I go back to my personality test. Oh, look, my personality test says that I don't really need friends. I'm good on my own. And that's a lie. I may feel like I don't need them. Lots of people feel like they don't need help, or they don't need love, or they don't need companionship. A lot of people feel like they don't need those things at a particular time in their life when they're strong or when they're confident. But everybody's life at some point in time is not going to be strong or confident. It's going to be broken. It's going to be hurting. And all of a sudden, the person that was there for me day in and day out was not. And that was so hard for me. Kim will tell you, I mean, I always joke about that I was raised by a robot, I grew up as a robot, and that's the way I love my life. And it is. I like to be logical. I like to say, this is what we're going to do. And it's hard for me to emote a lot of times. It's hard for me to really feel, at least it has been throughout my life. But that moment where Darren died, and I was going through the process of how do I reorder my life, I realized all of a sudden I couldn't cope with things that I had coped with before. Why couldn't I? Well, it took me a long time to realize that I couldn't, because the person that was my coping mechanism for me was no longer there to lift me up, to support me, to encourage me. It wasn't a luxury to have Darren around. It was a necessity to have Darren around. See, friends are so important. Friends are like a pressure release valve. We've got that Instapot. And when you're cooking in it, there's a time that it's so pressurized. But before you can open that lid on it, you have to hit that pressure release valve. And the steam comes out with such power. And you think, oh, it's going to pop out and it'll be just fine. But it keeps going and going and going because there's so much pressure. It takes so long to relieve it. And in our lives, if we don't have that friend that's near us, that one that's closer than anybody else, we often let that pressure build up inside us, and those hard times build up inside us, and those things come up inside, and we can't release the pressure. And if we don't have that person who can be that pressure release valve in our life to let us blow off a little steam and not judge us for it, just to be able to say, hey, I hate life right now, or I'm struggling with my job right now, but somebody you can blow off that steam to, you just build up, and that's unhealthy, and it's not biblical. God tells us that we need somebody, that 2 are stronger than 1. Friends are our emotional support humans. when you just need somebody to be emotional with, when you need somebody to support you in a hard time, friends become that emotional support for you. They're that early warning system. It's amazing how many times we're blinded by things we're doing in our own lives, and it takes a friend to say, hey, do you see the destructive path that you're going on? Do you see the problems that you're in, whether we're dealing with some sort of addiction or depression or if we're having problems in a family or whatever with our relationships? A friend is that person that's able to warn us. A friend is that comfort food sometimes. You know, sometimes when you just want to feel comfortable, you just want to kick your shoes off and wear pajamas, you know, pajama day or whatever. You know, the friend's that person that you don't have to be yourself. You know, we're going to talk about dating and relationships. Others, dating are the fakest people in the world, all right? You may be the nicest person in the world, but I promise you, you're putting on makeup and you're doing all the deodorant and stuff like that, all right? Your best friend calls you up and you're like, I'm not even going to pick the garbage off the floor. Maybe they will when they come in. You know, it's your friend. It's comfortable. They're your buddy system for living. You know, you go to the pool, they always say, get your buddy. That's what the passage says. Two people are stronger than one. One falls, the other lifts them up. And it's tough when that gets broken. I mean, some of us live blindly just thinking, oh, I'll just make it work. I don't need a friend. That's the way I thought for a long time, when all along I had one of the best friends in the world that was there supporting me, lifting me up. But that moment that you don't have it, I mean, friends will do anything for you. And they serve all these different purposes. John chapter 15 tells us about one more thing about friendships. It says, there's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. You're my friends if you do what I command. And I no longer call you slaves, because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I've told you everything the Father told me. You know that passage, there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your friend. I mean, do you have that kind of friend? Somebody that you're willing to lay your life down for? Somebody that's willing to lay down their life for you? There are still times. There was time this week. Wednesday, I skipped Bible study with Joe Wednesday because Pastor Chris was having a meeting with a bunch of the church planners and wanted me to be there with them, and so was there, and we were talking about accountability people in our lives, accountability partners in your lives. And for the longest time, Darren was my accountability guy. He knew the ins and outs of everything I was doing. At certain times, Kevin had been my accountability partner. Jimmy had been my accountability partner. And driving home from Manchester that night, dark as it could be, was kind of overwhelmed with the sense that these men that have held me accountable and been there with me my entire life, some are not even around anymore. Some I haven't talked to in months. I just wanted that moment just to talk with one another. To just say, here I am, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm up to. Because I needed a friend. And it's tough. And I know a lot of us have kind of lived in that flux sometimes where maybe we don't have that one tight friend. But man, if you've got that tight friend, you need to embrace it and love it. And for those of you that don't, that are like, oh, well, I've got my family. Well, family's great, and we're going to talk about family later in the month. Family's not a friend. You need to have that friend, that person that has your back, the person that you can talk about your family with and be encouraged and be challenged and be made better. I like this passage because it ultimately says that Jesus is your friend. He says, I'm not your master. You're not a slave. He says, we're now friends because I share everything that the Father tells me with you. And so I ask you, are you building up a godly friendship? Do you have somebody that can stand there with you and with Jesus? You know, because that passage that said 2 people together are good, but it said 3 people are better. And if you've got Jesus as one of your friends and you as one of your friends, do you have that third person that the 3 of you can be together, because a 3-cord strand is not easily broken? Guys, friendship is not a luxury. And I want you to know I'm preaching to me more than I'm preaching to you, all right? I mean, you know, Kim and I have come up from a long way, and we have left everybody we have behind. And you know what's hard to do? To be a pastor and then to make new friends. Because no matter what you do, you're always the pastor. Hey, we want the pastor to come over? I don't know. He's the pastor. He's going to judge me for something. I'm not going to judge you for anything, okay? I don't care to judge you. I don't want to critique anything in your life. You can come and critique stuff in my life all you want to. That's what we get as a pastor. But it's tough. And even with that, it's just been a year or so. It's tough to build the kind of friendships that you can have in a year and a half, that you're like, oh man, that's gonna rival a friendship that I had for decades. That we raised our families together and did that, and that robot side of me so desperately wants to just reboot the system and say, let's go back to that friends are disposable idea. That was nice because we didn't get hurt. I wrote an article not too long after Darren passed away, talking about the Tin Man. You know, in The Wizard of Oz, he says, you know I have a heart because it's broken. And you want to take a robot and you want to teach a robot how precious relationships truly are. It happens just like the Tin Man. You have to break that Tin Man's heart. And Tin Men don't like having their heart broken. They don't like feeling emotions. They don't like having to build relationships. But it's personal to me now because I know how valuable it is. It's not a luxury. Friendship is not disposable to me anymore. I value the time that each and every one of you spend with me and spend with my family, because I know how important that is, just to lift us up and to encourage us and to help us get through the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. And don't deny yourself that either. Don't allow yourself to get comfortable in your life and just saying, hey, I'm fine. Me and Ben and Jerry's, we got it all taken care of, all right? Bring somebody else in. Bring multiple people in, and make sure that Jesus is one of those people in that group. That he's your friend. That he is a part of what y'all are doing. I know this is different than how I normally speak on a Sunday morning, but it's personal to me. And when we talk about relationships have to be personal. And like I said, I think a lot of us treat friendships like acquaintances, and I think they're different. You can have acquaintances. You can make contacts for your work and people that you know around town and those that you grew up with, or the people that live down the street, and it's great. Have those acquaintances. You need those because that's often where you're finding your one, people you're going to be reaching out to and building that spiritual relationship with. But in that whole process, don't neglect to actually have a genuine friendship. People that believe as you believe and will encourage you in what you're doing and will call you out when you're at fault and praise you when you succeed. Somebody that's going to be there with you when you fall, because we're all going to fall. And somebody that's going to be able to count on you to lift them up when they fall. That's my prayer and that's my encouragement for you this week. That you be able to build that friendship strong. And if you have that strong friendship, that perhaps like me, you wouldn't take it for granted until the person's not there. And then you have to start saying, what do I do now? Appreciate the fact that God gave you that friend to make you better, to make you stronger, and to help your life out in the long run. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father,